Hello and welcome to the Be Well Now Method podcast. I am Janet Holtz, creator of the Be Well Now Method and founder of Exercising Well. And I am here today with Gretchen Holmes. And Gretchen is an author. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She just has so many great assets that I am so happy to share. And if you were lucky enough to hear the podcast, the last episode that I did with Gretchen, I'm sure that you are as excited as I am to have her back. I went for my annual eye exam today, and I walked. When the doctor walked into the room, she said, "Do you have any questions about your eyes?" And I thought I was not prepared for that question, and I didn't even put two and two together that I was recording this podcast with Gretchen today on communicating with your provider. So it really stuck with me. And throughout the whole visit, I was like, wait, do I have questions? I don't know. And it was very distracting. So I'm very much looking forward to learning from Gretchen about healthcare communication. And especially when you have some chronic medical issues, it's really important to know how providers are thinking and how to communicate with them. So Gretchen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm always excited to come and talk with you, Janet.
Thanks,
It's
Gretchen.
exciting.
Would you just give a bit about your background and for the listeners who haven't heard you before?
Sure. So I'm Gretchen Holmes, and I have a PhD in health communication. So I've been a social scientist for over 20 years. And my area of study has always been provider patient communication, rapport building, decision making, all those types of dynamics that occur between providers and patients. And then I also bring a lot of personal experience, having been a 3-time cancer survivor, diagnosed diabetic, been obese or morbidly obese my entire life until I was diagnosed diabetic. And then I decided it was probably time to make some changes. So I lost over 100 pounds, though I must admit some of that's found its way back, but you know, it's a process.
Mm.
But I ended up starting a podcast called The Work in Between, and that focuses on the daily habits that we need to uh, access and employ to help get us to our goals, whatever those health related goals are. And then I decided to write a book because why not? And so now I talk a lot about provider patient communication, patient advocacy, how to engage with people who have obesity. Basically, I'm trying to help us build better partnerships
Mm.
between patients and providers, whether you're physicians or nurses or med techs or fitness professionals or whatever. It's always a partnership, and so I think we need to have more conversations around what all of us can do to be more successful when we get together.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm so thankful you're doing this work, Gretchen. And I read Gretchen's book and I absolutely recommend it. And Gretchen's focus is always on what you can do inside. And I think this ties so well into communication, right? To be a good communicator, you've got to first know what you want to communicate and be very clear about it, but also aware of who you're communicating with. And I'm excited to kind of jump into that perspective that you have from both sides of it. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it, and I
Mhm.
will say that what I have found through my own experience really is that we're never going to speak up, or at least I wouldn't, if I didn't feel I was worth anybody's time,
Mm.
nor the effort for me to speak up. So I think a lot of our communication challenges aren't just that we don't know what to say or how to say, it's also because we don't necessarily believe we are worth having those conversations. So I do think that internal work is really important so that we
Yeah.
understand that no matter what the scale says, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what your issues are, you are worthy, you are wonderful, you are amazing, you're special, you're fantastic, and all the rest of that stuff is trappings. But we got to feel good about who we are so that we can engage with other people, especially when there's a power differential.
Yeah.
Makes it tough.
Yes. Yes. And 100%. And that aligns so well with the Be Now, well Now method. And that's why it's a perfect segue into starting with the B step and starting with the meditation. And it's why I do the Be Well Now method, because it does take us inside first and develop that connection inside so we can bring what we know inside, which our providers don't know. So the first step is just kind of getting here. So if you'd like to join me, you might close your eyes or just get yourself comfortable or let your eyes gaze on something, but let your attention drop into your body and let your body find a position where your bones are holding you and your muscles don't have to work very hard. And you can just let yourself be. You might have been doing all day. And take a moment to just let your body take care of you. So feel your body holding you, feel your breath taking care of you, and feel this sense of being in a body that is taking care of you right now. Your breath is moving in and out without you having to do anything at all. It's digesting food, it's healing, restoring just by being. And let that bring your awareness to your center and feel this sense that you can trust what you know inside in these places of knowing. So let your attention rest on your center and notice what you know here beyond thoughts. Let this rest in trusting not only your body, but your heart. And feel that sense of what only you know inside. Nobody else can tell you what your body feels like. Nobody else can tell you what matters most to you, what you value. So let that really bring in this sense of empowerment, confidence, expanding that awareness to your body. And notice if there's any place in your body that's holding some ready to move tension that wants to move, or maybe you just want to do a gentle massage in an area. Maybe it's an area that you want to be healed and that is challenging right now, or maybe it's an area that has healed and you can move it and celebrate that it healed. Making this connection with your body and the wisdom that your body has right now in this moment. And let your body settle back to stillness and keep that trust in what you know inside as your eyes gently open. And so, um, where would you recommend someone starts? Let's say they see on their calendar they have their annual eye appointment coming up, for instance, or anything. Where would you recommend someone starts in terms of preparing?
So, most of us don't enjoy going to see doctors.
Mhm.
Nothing
Yeah,
against doctors. In
yeah,
fact, I know a lot of doctors that don't like to go see doctors.
right.
It's stressful,
Mm,
and you're not weird, or there's nothing wrong with you if it causes you to feel stressed. So
mm,
I think acknowledging that, wow, this really causes me a little bit of anxiety
yeah,
is okay,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
study this stuff and I get stressed when I go to the doctor.
yeah,
So, what I have found that's been helpful for me is I really do start thinking, probably obsessing, but I do start thinking about the
mm,
visits a day or two before. And I ask myself, really, what is important to me
yeah,
in this visit? If it's your if it's your, I've never been asked the same question you were asked at
mhm,
an eye visit, but I love that question for that.
yeah,
But if you're going to see your doctor, if it's a every 3 months visit or an annual visit, I really do take some time to think about, well, what is it that I really do want to talk about?
mm,
What's important to me, not
yeah,
what I think is going to be important to them.
mhm,
And when I was obese or morbidly obese, I knew what was always going to be
yeah,
the on their mind when I walked in the
right,
door about what really was important to me. And I tend to write down my thoughts. I
yeah,
will write down a couple of things that, or everything that's important and that's bugging me or worrying me. or even maybe sometimes I want to share some good news. When I was in the process of losing weight, of course, I was
Yeah.
always excited to go, because then I would give them all my updates. But if there were certain things I wanted to share, I write that down. And if I'm having pain, or something's different, I try to write down what's going
Yeah.
on. Does it hurt more in the morning? Does it hurt less? What's helped? Do I remember when it kind of came on?
Mhm.
Because you forget.
Mhm.
You think you're not going to forget those things, but you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, or at least I do. So I tend
Yeah.
to jot down a few notes, and I will even go as far as to practice how
I
I
like that.
want to ask a question or say something.
I like that.
Because if I don't, when I get in the room and I'm pretty confident in
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
I will either forget, or I'll flub it up, or
Mhm.
I will not ask it because I lose my nerve or
Yeah.
whatever. So I do think having some preparation before you go, and I think it's a really important thing to check in with yourself and
Mhm.
ask yourself, what is important to me right now? What do I
Yeah.
need from them? Because we know from research that physicians and patients, their goals are not the same necessarily
Mhm.
when they go into an interaction together,
Yeah.
but the patient's concerns and
Yeah.
goals are just as important, if not more so, than the
Right.
physician's goals.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to check in with yourself and
Yeah.
think and ask yourself, well, what's really important to me at this moment in time?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's because something has happened and it's worried you,
Mhm.
or something's gotten worse
Mhm.
and you want it's starting to weigh on your mind a little bit,
Yeah.
and or maybe there's something going on out in society that,
Mhm.
with COVID or the bird flu or whatever,
Yeah.
and maybe that's what's causing you a lot of anxiety. So I think checking in with yourself is most important.
Okay. So I want to go back to the difference between providers and patients and their goals. But first, I want to point out something that you said that I think is really important. And I learned in coach training, and I know we've talked about this before, that wouldn't it be great if the first question was, what's going well?
Mhm.
And I asked that of my patients, and they're like, what's going well? Aren't we here to talk about problems? Because that's what providers do. We're taught problem solution. That's what we're trained to do. Um, and I like starting with it as a provider because it starts higher and it says there's something good here that we can take. And even if they say, oh, nothing, I'm totally messing everything up. And even if we talk a little bit, we can usually find something. So I'm I'm wondering if, you don't have a provider who already does that, that in your list you could start with what's going well. So you're starting that conversation on the upswing. And in coaching, I learned, and it changes the whole course of the conversation when you do that. It gives some balance to it and it makes you feel a little more empowered. And I think it tells the provider, oh, okay, all right, everything's okay. I don't have to go into like problem solving mode right away. Let me acknowledge that. Even if they don't acknowledge it, I feel like it helps to say it.
Yeah, I do. I agree. And I think something we don't do very well as a society is we don't celebrate our wins.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how we define what those wins are,
Right.
varies from day to day, but it's not always about a big job. It's not
Yeah.
always about finishing a really complex task. I mean, some days the wins I celebrate is I got up,
Mhm.
I had breakfast.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't bite anybody. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes those are your wins, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't celebrate what we do well. We take what we do well for granted,
Mhm.
and then we dismiss it, and
Mhm.
then we go on to figure out what we need to beat ourselves up about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we need to flip that. I'm a big believer, and I think we need to flip that script because why we only focus on the negative all the time? It's probably there's probably some complicated thing that explains that, but I just think that we could all do better to focus on things that we're doing well, and then
Yeah.
redefine what we even think doing well means, what a
Yeah.
win is.
Yeah. It is coaching psychology. It really is. And it was a big learn for me in a coaching
Yeah.
training. to learn to pull that out and to not see it as like Pollyanna, but to find the gems in it because it is positive psychology. And it says, if we focus on that, we're going to raise people up. We're not going to pull them down. And especially if you've got something like carrying extra body weight, you're used to being pulled down. The first thing they do is take your weight. And
Yeah.
then it's like, downhill from there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think this leads into the difference between what patients' goals are and what providers' goals are. So can you speak more to that? Help us get in the mind of a provider and why it seems so hard to align those needs for the two people in the room who are both wanting health, right? Both wanting the same thing, that person to be healthy.
Yeah, but I think that the way physicians are trained, and I work in a medical school, I oversee residents, and so I spend a lot of time with in the health in the medical
Yeah.
field, and what they are really focused on is the scientific method of figuring out what's wrong, right?
Mhm.
Because now they're going to fix it. And it's not their fault. I mean, that really is how they're trained. They
Yeah.
have to learn how to be a really good diagnostician. They have to
Mhm.
learn, how to get you to optimal health
Mhm.
in the most efficient and appropriate way.
Yes.
And along the way, and I just actually wrote a really good article on this about
Mhm.
clinical compassion.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there's a tendency to just try to get to the point. Now, in everyone's defense, there is a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on all providers to get you in, get you out. You're very limited in the amount of time you get to spend
Mhm.
together. And I think there is a fear that if we really start to engage with people, then, and I'm not a physician, I'm a patient
Yeah.
and in that sense. But I think there's always this sense that, my gosh, if we really asked, what's going on, they would talk for days.
Yeah.
But that's not true.
No.
The research does not bear that out. But what it does say is that you gain a lot of really important information when you ask
Mhm.
your patients, what's going on,
Yeah.
what are you worried about, what do you want to talk
Yeah.
about. But you also are building a really strong relationship, which is
Mhm.
really important because that's where
Yeah.
trust is built.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I think a lot, at least my physicians were much more focused on making sure that they counseled me about my weight,
Mhm.
that we talked about, whatever physiological things were going on. And
Yeah.
sometimes, from a patient perspective, we're looking for reassurance,
Mhm.
we're looking for support, we're looking for someone to tell us we're not dying from something, that, what we're feeling is normal, that
Yes.
we feel your partner.
Mm.
So while I think sometimes the goals are not, they're not matching, it doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive. It's
Yeah.
just that sometimes we need, well, all times, I think patients really do need to speak up. They need to
Mhm.
be asked what's
Yeah.
important to them. So I think it gives physicians and other health providers some real
Mhm.
insight into,
Mm.
well, what's important to them. And sometimes
Yeah.
when you can meet them where they are, meet us where we are, then
Yeah.
we are much more open to having conversations or talking about something that we might have been uncomfortable about before. So
Yes.
it really does make good sense to talk about what's important to the patient, even though if you look at it on your list of, wow, the three most important things going on here, I would not have put that at the top of the list.
Mm.
But if it's really, really important to a patient, it's
Yeah.
really, really important. It
Yeah.
just is. And,
Yeah.
it's funny because a lot of people, if, we all have different ideas of what being healthy even means.
Right.
For some, as long as they're able to get up and go to work every day, they're fine,
Mm.
they're healthy.
Yeah.
For others, every little thing might trip them up, right? And so it's really important to have a conversation about kind of their health beliefs
Mm.
and what really is important to them, because many of us are fearful of not being able to provide for our families,
Mm.
and if something gets in the way of that, that's a problem. If it's
Mhm.
just physical discomfort for me, that's not as big of a problem.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like from a patient perspective to have that perspective, one, that there's going to be a time crunch. So having that written down, having it very prioritized a list. And then also it sounds really important to have a good sense just in general of, yeah, what health means to you. What is important to you? Like you said, maybe it is just providing for your family and you're not looking to have a perfect diet. What's enough to keep me healthy? And I think you going in with that as a patient is really helpful to say, these are the important things. And this is what I really am not ready to change or don't care about changing. Um, so I think as the patient, it sounds like what you're saying is going in prepared, but not just with the list, go in prepared to know that doctor's going to probably look for problems. That doctor's going to have their own agenda of what they think is important. So you have to match it with what you think is important. And you really have to have a very good root understanding about what you're going for, what's important to you about your health and what's
Yeah, and
not.
I don't think we get asked that enough.
Yeah. No. I don't think we ask
Because
ourselves that enough.
no, we don't.
Yeah.
If you know you only have 10 minutes with your physician,
Yeah.
you probably ought to know what the at least if nothing else,
Yeah.
I need to make sure I bring this up,
Right.
right? So that
Right.
that helps you prioritize what's important.
Yeah.
So at least when you, because there are things that can wait till the
Mhm.
next visit, right?
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes there are things that can't. Now, for
Yeah.
example, if you may have all the physical issues in the world, right? And I've
Yeah.
had my share. If I were mentally or emotionally in a place where I was feeling like I was walking a very tight line. Like,
Mhm.
if one more thing happens, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I am right on the edge.
Yeah.
Of all the things I would want to talk about, my blood pressure wouldn't be it.
Mhm.
If I had high cholesterol, I would not care.
Mhm.
But if that's what's going on, I
Mhm.
I better be able I better make sure I prioritize that
Mhm.
because they may not ask that.
No. Yeah.
So,
Especially
one of my big things
yeah.
is that we have to advocate for ourselves and
Mhm.
we don't it's not particularly good practice to always wait to be asked
Yeah.
the magic question that is
Yeah.
going to elicit what we need to talk about.
Right.
So we have to take some real responsibility here to make sure that when we go see a physician or a nurse practitioner or
Mhm.
whomever, and
Mhm.
we know our time is limited with them because that's the healthcare world we live in,
Mhm.
then even if it's embarrassing, if it's awkward, if we're not even sure how to talk about it, it's our responsibility to bring it up. It's not fair to play this game with our healthcare
Right.
providers and go, well, if they ask about it,
Yeah.
I may say something.
Right.
That's not fair. And it's not fair to yourself. We have
No.
to take responsibility and ask or bring up those questions
Yeah.
because if that's really what's going on, you owe it to yourself
Yeah.
to bring it up. So please stop waiting for them to ask your magic question before
Right.
you share something that's really important to you because
Yeah.
they may not ask. And then you
Right.
miss another opportunity.
Yeah, we can't go in with that mindset like, "Oh, my doctor will know what I need."
No.
We have to go in saying, "This is important to me." Listen to what the doctor says. "Yeah, but your blood pressure also is a concern," but that ties it all together.
Yeah.
So, do you have advice for somebody who, is carrying extra weight, is
hmm
obese, overweight, and is just so, continually gets that as the top priority and they don't see anything else? Like, what would be your advice for somebody of how to talk to a any healthcare provider and
So
be seen
what
and
I've learned
heard.
over the
Yeah.
years is this. I have, especially when I'm seeing somebody new,
Yeah.
is when they come in and they say, "Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you." I will say pretty early on in the conversation, "Look, I am really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
I every doctor's visit I've had always starts with my weight.
Mm.
And I know that I have a weight problem. I know I'm overweight, obese, whatever language you want to use. And I would be happy to have that conversation, but probably not today. And
I love
so if
that.
we can focus on some other things, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then at a future time, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But, we can dictate some of that. Now, do I
Mhm.
think that it's wise to never get on a scale?
Mm.
No, it is an important metric.
Yeah.
Do I think there's too much emphasis and making people feel bad about it? Yes, I do. But I
Yeah.
think we have to have a sense of empowerment. And
Mhm.
and I also have always felt that if I brought it up, it kind of breaks the ice because they
Yeah.
don't want to bring it up either.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
likes talking about weight. It's
Right.
emotional, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, it
Yeah.
never goes well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
for
Because
anybody,
it's just it's
it's
always judgy.
terrible.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's better ways to do it, and we've talked about that. There's lots of. I think there's a lot of movement in that area. I'm seeing that in conferences. I'm seeing it in webinars. A lot of movement in that area, so it's great. But
Yeah.
as a patient, you've had this collection of experiences, so that's great advice to just preempt it and say, okay, what I know you're going to say, and here's what I'm willing to talk about. Here's what I'm not right now, and maybe later. And yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
because
you're
we
the right.
don't necessarily know them, right? Part of,
Yeah.
there's this implicit trust thing that we're
Yeah.
supposed to feel comfortable with anybody in a white coat or scrubs. And I don't always feel that comfortable.
Yeah.
I have to be
Yeah.
able to trust the person that I am going to be really vulnerable with.
Yeah.
I've heard the arguments, it's not in your best interest to withhold information. You're
Mhm.
not doing yourself. Well, you know what? It's not in my best interest if I bring something up as vulnerable as my weight
Mhm.
or something related and you shame me.
Yeah. That's not healthy either.
So that
Right.
doesn't get us anywhere. So I
Mhm.
think that a lot of patients don't feel they have very much control.
Yeah.
We do have control. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody needs to go in angry, or I mean, you can if you want, but I mean, I don't typically go in angry, but I'm not always in the best mood either
Mm.
because
Yeah.
it's anxiety producing for me. But I have found for me
Mhm.
that when I take the lead and set the tone and say, look, this is where I'm at today.
Yeah.
This is what I'm comfortable with. That I actually end up doing a lot better with that provider,
Yeah.
and at least they know where I stand. And so
Yeah.
it does open up a conversation.
Yeah.
We can talk about how we want to get information. Do we prefer things in writing? Do we
Mhm.
prefer them over the phone? Do
Right.
we want to have additional people that we'd like to talk to because
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense to us? Great. Fine,
Mhm.
ask for it. Do we need
Yeah.
somebody to help us if you're newly diagnosed diabetic? It is so confusing. It is so confusing. Handing me the carbohydrate exchange is not going to help me. I don't understand it. And so we have more control, but my goal is always to help patients speak up more
Mm.
and get their needs communicated,
Yeah.
and then also help physicians or
Yeah.
healthcare providers engage with their patients in a way that don't shut their patients down,
Mhm.
right? Everybody needs to be respectful.
Mhm.
Everybody needs to be. But
Yeah.
I think we need to provide more information than less. And I think we need to take more responsibility for our part in this really important dyad. We're supposed to
Yeah.
be on the same team, but we
Yeah.
do tend to knock heads a lot.
Right. Yeah. It's true. This is such good information, Gretchen. It's awesome. What would be a takeaway that you would say to somebody? Kind of, is there any, last bit of advice or a takeaway?
So I would say, nobody needs to change their personality. You don't have to become somebody you're not. If you're not comfortable speaking up, write a couple questions down, write a
Mm.
couple things down, take the piece of paper in with you. I have
Yeah.
done that. And
Yeah.
frankly, it's usually received really well.
Mm.
Start small. If
Yeah.
you're uncomfortable bringing things up, bring up something that is doesn't have such a high risk for you, something
Mm.
that's not so emotional. Just start small. Start
Yeah.
learning how to advocate for yourself by asking one question
Mm.
that you would have not normally asked, and then the next time ask a different question.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna, none of us are going to change our personalities, but I would also say to not only prepare, but pay attention so that you can write down important things like
Mm,
when did the pain start, and when did you
yeah.
start feeling bad, and what do you think was going on? What do you think is
Mm,
happening? And because again, they'll ask those questions because that's how they figure out what's going on. And when
right.
all we do is sit there and go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, kind of. I don't.
Yeah.
We have to do better than that because that's
Yes.
not serving anybody either. And
Right.
so I think we have to take steps to be more proactive in our healthcare. We become better partners
Hmm.
and step out of our comfort zones a little bit.
Yeah. I love that, Gretchen. Thank you. Very inspiring. I can't wait for my next appointment now. I'll be ready.
But they won't know what hit them.
Be like, wow. It's awesome. Thank you again for being on the Be Well Now Method podcast. I really appreciate it. I will put all Gretchen's information, how to find her, how to get her amazing book, and learn more about her and from her in the show notes. So thank you, Gretchen. I really appreciate it. Great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to having you on again.
Thank you, Janet, and I appreciate everything you do. We have a lot of work to do, but I think we're getting there. I
We're
think
getting
things
there.
are the needle is moving.